It's a great honor to be able to present this topic, and it's a topic obviously near and dear to my heart and something we work with literally around the clock here at the university, especially as we grow or move into a really busy time of campus development over the next few months and years ahead. So with that, what I'd like to do is just really to jump into the presentation. I know we have a lot of room, or a lot of territory to cover, and if we can get the device to cooperate here, maybe you could help move this forward. There we go. So this is a favorite shot. You could get to the. There we go. This is a perspective that is actually quite unique in terms of being able to see it. You can see the scaffold in the foreground, and it's last taken. I think Matt Kishore, our incredibly talented university photographer, did this when we last gilded the dome. It was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And what I love about it, the perspective, is that you see for a long distance, you can see South Bend, of course, in the very distant part of the frame at the horizon, but you see this wonderful, I call it a French village in the foreground, and what a remarkable campus we have, and the reminder that it really all spins off of the vision that Father Sorin had with the Notre Dame Avenue really acting as the formative axis from everything from which grows from there, including the main quad, our really sacred heart of the campus, if you will, Sacred Heart pathway, as you see there in the foreground, and of course the basilica to the immediate right. Well, just 100 years ago, we can take a look at essentially the same perspective and see the development that the campus has really enjoyed in that century of time, and terrific view of the campus and the growing university with the buildings to the left and right. You can see glimpses of the Fortune Hall to the left, and Crowley Hall a little bit further beyond before the fire that took off the third floor of that building, and to the right, just a glimpse of the Basilica at Sorin College, as it was called at the time, and Walsh Hall. And then just immediately beyond the main quad was farmland, owned, of course, and managed by the university, because it was still subsistent on the production of crops and agriculture to sustain the university. So what a difference 100 years makes. I love that perspective. Certainly more recently, as we think about the growth of campus, I often like to look back to the beginnings of the 1950s, essentially post-World War, and of course our two iconic leaders at the time coming into the presidency and the executive vice presidencies, Father Hesburgh, of course, and Father Joyce, and maybe mark that as the beginning of the modern era of Notre Dame, certainly as we know it today, the beginnings of that. And at the time we had about 3 million square feet under roof. So again, circa early 1950s, and here we are well into the next century, approximately 65 years later, if you will, and encroach or eclipse the 10 million square feet mark. And as you see at the top of the screen, 171 buildings comprising that square footage across the 1,265 acres of campus real estate here on the contiguous campus. We are indeed about to enjoy a spurt in terms of rate of growth. And I like this slide because it shows that it's really not an unprecedented spurt. While we're going to be very busy with continued development of the campus and I'll describe momentarily, many other spurts across the last 65 years, most notably in the 1960s with the construction of the Hesburgh Library, of course, the Joyce Center, eventually the Grayson Flanner Halls, and many other buildings through the 1960s. And then you can see a bit of a quiet time during the 1970s, and then in the 80s and 90s, and certainly in the last 20 years or so, a pretty consistent growth. And so on average, when I go back to this, if you struck a line, you would between the two extreme ends, you would see that we grow the campus on average about 2% per year if you measured at least total square footage, and it's been a fairly consistent growth since then. So now let's go ahead and take a look and discuss some of the projects that are coming up. And so I put this campus plan image up, and what we'll do is focus our attention on two zones of campus. The first in the northeast part, northeast quadrant, and really a very interesting opportunity to grow the campus in very important ways. And then to the south, continued development of that part of campus begun at least 20 or 25 years ago. So first, the northeast part, you can see the large block in the lower left center, if you will, of the screen is the footprint of Hesburgh Library. And so to the immediate east is the B2 library parking lot, home to about 1,000 cars on campus here for parking, about 10% of our total parking population. As we look to this part of campus and think about the needs for the growing Notre Dame, and particularly our renewed emphasis and desires for really becoming absolutely outstanding in research, continuing our commitment to exemplary undergraduate education, but growing research in profound new ways. This, as we analyzed the campus, became an opportunity for us to grow and development of essentially a new quad. So I'll advance the slide and show that from the library, if you strike a horizontal axis, east-west axis, there's an opportunity to grow a new quadrangle. And for, I guess, working purposes, we call it the East Quad, east of the library. And it forms the opportunity to provide a site partially on the parking lot that I just described for a new research complex. This, in essence, will be about a 217,000 square foot wet lab building. So teams of researchers from science and engineering will be able to collaborate together to really continue to attack some of the great problems that we face on our globe, and also be home for new scientists and researchers that will be invited to come to Notre Dame and join us. So it's a very flexible building, one in which that is so important to us. We're fast tracking it in terms of we'll actually start construction of that project imminently, yet this fall in August, and proceed in a very fast pace so that in 2 years we're ready to occupy this building with those research teams and probably leave some flex space behind and allow us to continue to grow out and fill out shell space that we'll plan in the building. So it's an exciting new addition to campus. You also see an opportunity that was provided to us a few years ago when we were successful in closing Juniper Road and moving that public traffic to further to the east on the new Twickenham Road. Gave us an opportunity for 2 new sites. We've now labeled for 2 new residence halls. So we're working to develop those. I'll show those to you momentarily, but you can see they'll continue the community that we have on the north part of campus, really spun out of the Mod Quad, I think it's commonly referred to. So new neighbors to Pasquarilla East and Knott Hall, respectively. This is essentially, I'll call phase 1 of the build out of this part of campus. There'll be future phases and future opportunities to continue campus development in this area. And so I've moved the slide so where you can see that, we anticipate that we'll continue to grow our needs for new research space, wet lab, dry lab, collaborative, computational space. And so we plan for another building site immediately to the east of Complex 1, and we'll continue then the development of East Quad in that direction. Clearly at that point in time, we'll probably have necessitated the consideration of a parking structure. And so in our campus plan, in our longer term view, we are anticipating the possibility of a parking structure located immediately to the southeast of Steppen Center, right north of Grace Hall. It's already on a parking lot, or that's already a parking lot in that area, somewhat pushed below the surface. So it gives us an opportunity to maybe absorb a parking structure in that part of campus and really provide convenient, fairly accessible parking to a large group of faculty and staff on campus. Here are images of both a blow-up of the site plan for the research complex. You can see how its west elevation and south elevation form an edge, and the entry points will actually be a knuckle that helps transition this new east quad going east-west into open space north-south that will form the forecourt, lawn, if you will, of the two new residence halls that I'll speak about momentarily. And then an image of the new research building. And while we considered a variety of different architectural styles, it always came back to us that it made sense to continue the French Village, and so this is why this is designed in continuing the Notre Dame's version of the collegiate Gothic architectural vernacular. So we're very proud of the building. It's going to be an incredibly important new asset to us, and we're really excited to get started in construction with it imminently. For this map, I want to explain that north flipped on us. It actually went from being at the top of the screen to the right. So you can see Pascarilla east to the top, as well as Knott Hall. So you can see now how those two halls, one men's and one women's, will complement those existing halls and create a really nice series of courtyards, both on the west, which is at the top of those new halls, and then to the south, where that's that lawn area that will then form the western edge of a new north-south space. So this will be where the kids will play outdoor games and the traditional touch football and frisbee and those kinds of things. So these are exciting projects, really intended to help complement our current stable of 29 undergraduate residence halls, to actually give a little bit more space to folks, decant them, the halls somewhat, and to really accommodate the wonderful demand that we have for undergraduate housing here on campus. And so it'll help deal with the wait list of folks wishing to come on campus, particularly accommodating transfer students and such. Here's in progress designs. We're actively working on these buildings. These aren't final by any measure of the imagination, but in progress sketches that begin to intimate the style and the massings, I think very much influenced by our more recently completed residence halls, Duncan and Ryan halls, finished in the last 10 years or so on the southern part of campus. And so we'll bring that architectural style up to this neighborhood as well. We expect to start construction on these two halls in the early spring of next year, and they'll be completed also at the same time the research building across the way will be completed 2 years from now. So this new part of campus will really literally spring out of the ground in the next 24 months and be a new green part of campus, turned from the asphalt parking lots that currently exist. So now we've changed our view to the southern part of campus, and in focus to the left is the footprint of the Performing Arts Center, to the right is the Compton Family Ice Arena, and then in between is the Notre Dame Sculpture Park, where you can see it looks like a body of water that forms the real focus, I think, of the art that is distributed along the pathways. And then bordered are the Joyce Center access to the right, and then Eddy Street continues on. So Eddy Street Commons is immediately to the south, right off the edge of this particular image. So this is a snapshot of how that situation looks today, with the parking immediately east of Performing Arts and north of the Sculpture Park. And so we plan for some continued development in this part of campus. And so flipping to the slide, or flipping the next slide, we think really to begin to form and continue what, lack of a better term, maybe an arts quad, if you will, to bring to that area from south to north a new art museum. This has been long something that the university's aspired to, begun to raise money for it. We're not all there, have raised all the funds yet, but certainly holding this site as an important new site for a new art museum. We've really run out of space in the Snipe Museum, very difficult to access, both for patrons as well as just to get large shows in and out of the Snipe Museum. And so we envision this hopefully in the next 5 or 10 years or so. And then immediately north of that, just a placeholder for a future building, probably longer term view there, but something that we're just cognizant of and trying to reserve space for. And then very importantly, immediately north of that, at the intersection of Eddy Street and Holy Cross Drive, in the southeast quadrant of that intersection, is home for a new school of architecture. So we've begun planning that building and working with John Simpson, a notable classicist architect from London, and a partner firm VOA out of Chicago. So it's an exciting new building for us. It'll really allow the School of Architecture to continue to grow, both its undergraduate programs, its centers for excellence inside that department, but also grow its graduate programs. So we anticipate starting construction within the next couple of years on that project, and then take maybe 1.5 years to 2 years to have that completed. And then I've panned our view over to Notre Dame Avenue. So you can see the entrance from Angela at the very bottom of the screen. You can clearly see the vista of Notre Dame Avenue, the tree-lined, very historic row. And then really one of the last terrific sites along the avenue for campus development will be home for 2 new buildings that essentially are interlocked together, Jenkins Hall and Nanomech Halls. So they will consume the parking lot that's located immediately south of the Hesburgh Center for International Studies, and you see some in-progress designs for that building. It'll be a grand, actually 2 buildings, again, nested together, be a great foreground for people coming to campus and beginning to understand its architectural style and beginning that message of you've really entered this terrific, wonderful French village that we call Notre Dame. Here is a rendering in progress of that of the entrance into Nanomech Hall itself. So this is the essentially the forecourt as one approaches the building from the south and southwest direction. We're also busy with planning a series of improvements and renovations to the Hesburgh Library. It's a terrific building and has stood the test of time and served as a wonderful asset to the university for now over 50 years. But of course, it is in need of some improvements, particularly to respond to how libraries are used in today's pedagogy and learning and teaching styles, and how students and faculty will use them, graduate students. And so we've begun to envision a series of improvements, and the first one will actually be very concentrated on the first and second floors and really try to begin to open the building up, both inwardly as well as outwardly. So improvements to the east and west access points to allow more daylight into the building, and then at nighttime have the building act more as a lantern, as a guiding light for campus constituents. It's a building that's operated 24/7 essentially, almost all year round. And so it's home for a lot of folks throughout the day and night. And I think the opportunity to have it as a more welcoming building and more accessible even than it is today is prudent here. We also plan to open the building up from the north and to actually create a 3rd major entrance to it. From that, or 4th major entrance, I should say, from the north, and so that's what the arrow on the left side of the drawing indicates. And then to drop in and maybe even a series of skylights to get daylight into that 2nd floor, and even maybe cut away some floors, some of the floor between the 1st and 2nd floors to allow that daylight, some of those views to transfer back and forth between 1st and 2nd floors, and really enliven those spaces for the variety of purposes and needs that will be incorporated into this project. And so we actually see that renovations will begin as early as this coming January 2015, and then it'll begin a series of projects as funding is available that will eventually work its way through most of the library in the ensuing years to come. So we're really excited about this, a real reinvigoration of a terrific building for really one of our really iconic buildings here at Notre Dame. Then lastly, I'll talk about the Campus Crossroads project. Of course, a very large project and very historic in its proportion, its potential impact for campus. And then we'll turn it open for questions. And so I think this word has been, I think, well distributed since January when we were asked to proceed with the development of feasibility study into the design phase, and it's been an interesting and wonderful experience to be a part of it. In essence, of course, just as a reminder for folks, this is about the construction of 3 buildings that we placed on the east, west, and southern portions of the Notre Dame Stadium, and to really revitalize, if you will, or vitalize maybe for the first time, that area that surrounds the stadium. And so we're often asked, well, why the stadium? Why these locations? And so I'd like to go back to just some again, the archives of some sort of context to help explain this. This is obviously a view of the stadium circa 1930, not very long after the stadium first opened. It was built by Knute Rockne and Jess Harper and those leaders at the time. So you can see it was isolated, and I can imagine that there may have been a discussion what would happen. Maybe this campus would grow around it, maybe it wouldn't, but certainly when we advance the slide, we can see that now 80 some odd years later, it's become an important placekeeper in not necessarily the heart of campus, but certainly in a major part of the campus. And when you consider the amount of parking to the south and the southeast of the stadium, and then the destinations that are contained within the campus, it's certainly part of the crossroads, if you will, that people traverse as they come to and from those resources, or come to and from Eddy Street Common and walk to those destinations beyond the stadium. Excuse me. Another perspective, I think very interesting in terms of the first building is really south of the South Quad, constructed in Notre Dame Stadium's case, of course, 1930, and then in the Morris Inn case, 1952. The only buildings really at the edge and maybe beyond considered the time of campus. And here we are, a photograph just taken a couple of years before we renovated and expanded the Morris Inn. But you can see certainly great evidence the campus has really grown in and around and knitted those buildings in quite nicely. But as campus planners and as we contemplated new needs, it's really sprung out of the strategic plan recently adopted, opportunities for placement of buildings unrelated to Notre Dame Stadium, but in and around those environs. And so to explain that, I go to this bullseye, if you will, and the true center point, crossroads of the campus, if you will, I think one could argue is the intersection Notre Dame Avenue and the South Quad. I think most people would argue that feels like the center and the geographic heart of the campus. And so if you spun a 5-minute walking radius from that center, this is the footprint one would get. And when we think about what happens within that circle, I paint in first our academic buildings. So this is the vast majority of academic life really exists in this L-shaped footprint. And that's not by happenstance. That was certainly by design with great planners well before me and others here at Notre Dame today. So a great legacy left to have the academic core so well concentrated. And then again, not just merely by happenstance, but certainly by design, our 2 residential neighborhoods, if you will, papered in here or penciled in here in yellow, that flank the academic core. What that leaves behind are areas I've shaded now in red that really are for us essentially difficult zones to build in. Certainly to the northwest, that's our spiritual center, our spiritual part of campus. That's the grotto, that's the basilica, that's the no-build zone for us. I mean, that's so pastoral, so beautiful, inspiring there. Don't contemplate new buildings in that area. And then to the very far west, at the left edge of the page, that's leaking into the Notre Dame Golf Course, and then to the south into important rec fields and into Cedar Grove Cemetery. These are essentially no-build zones for us as well, especially considering the type and size of buildings that we need. Particularly as we contemplate new academic buildings, we really want to co-locate them. And so what that leaves, when you look at this map, are openings in and around the stadium. So between the west face of Notre Dame Stadium and the east face of DeBarlo Quad, we see an opportunity. Same thing for the south of the stadium and in between the stadium and the Joyce Center. And so that was really the impetus behind the project in terms of trying to revitalize and best use of land, particularly as we're really committed to keeping Notre Dame very walkable, very pedestrian friendly, and try to get the right level of density for campus. So I'll very quickly explain the buildings and all the wonderful components of them. I'll begin with the south building because it's the most visible part of the project to the public. It obviously faces south, Eddy Street Commons, Angela. So that's what people will first encounter as they approach the building and the campus. This is a 6-story building, and it'll be home for our wonderful programs in music and sacred music. These folks are right now living in 8,900 square feet in Crowley Hall. They will move into 35,000 square feet of space. They're really well overdue for this opportunity, and it's just going to provide just an incredible impetus to these terrific programs. And so they'll have entry points into the building as suggested by that sketch. I'm not going to dwell on floor plans and get into that level of detail. This will be a multi-hour event if it is. But we have recital halls, instrumental rehearsal spaces. The music library will be moved out of the Hesburgh Library and be co-located with these departments. And then plenty of faculty offices and importantly, rehearsal spaces through the building. So it's just some in-progress images of the building, interiors, very well lit, a lot of fenestration, a lot of glass and daylighting into the building. On the third level of the building will actually be a club space. This actually lines up with the upper concourse of the existing stadium, so you can see in the upper right the underside of the existing bowl, and you can see entry into a club space. And so we're currently trying to understand what kind of hospitality space we would have in here. This doesn't have a view of the field, but certainly there'll be a lot of televisions in here, and then commanding views out to the south into the campus in that direction, Eddy Street, and the city beyond. So now our view is panned around to the east building. This is the southeast entrance to the east building, which has a multiplicity of components in it. First on the level will be our digital media center. This is it's a terrific intersection between academic and athletics life. So students will be able to work with faculty in this space to put their projects together, their video projects, their messaging out to the world and to their colleagues in terms of their academic projects and development and learning those techniques that are so critical today's teaching and learning. Levels 2, 3, 4, and 5 will be first anthropology on the second level, and then psychology departments. So those departments currently are just strewn about the campus and actually into the community. Most of that will all be co-located now and brought back to brand new departments, including their labs and their offices in this building. It makes a lot of sense. It'll be adjacent to a lot of parking, so local human subjects for psychology, for instance, will be able to access psychology offices and labs quite easily. The terrific new addition to campus on this side of the building. So some snapshots of first the the digital media area, control room space, studio in the building. This is a lab of anthropology, and then seminar space in anthropology and psychology. So just a variety of those kinds of examples of interior space. And then 3 levels above the rim, first 2 be outdoor club seating, and then the top level essentially is the press. We put the press on the east side, and includes both the written press as well as the radio press. The architecture of the buildings allow us to create these plazas, these little terraces on the outside. Don't have field views for game day, but every day give terrific, almost 360-degree views of campus and the community beyond. I think they'll be really popular spots for people to enjoy just really unprecedented vistas from current facilities here on campus. And then finally, the West Building. This is the largest building and about half the project total area, but just as important as the rest as well. So it's comprised of the first two levels, the new Student Center. This is a building that we've long envisioned in the last campus plan. It actually called for it to be constructed east of Steppen Center. This is going to be certainly much more accessible when you think about the map I had projected before in terms of where residential life is and where academic zones lie. This will become probably the busiest building on campus each and every day, not just game day. So two levels of a wonderful new student center being thought through and planned for the West Building. And some examples of sort of the character of the spaces: a large video wall, of course, the community kind of spaces, fireplaces. Food and beverage would be, of course, an important component of any student center, and it will be in this building as well. Level 3 and 4 will comprise of a new recreational sports facility, and so we'll be able to continue to grow those programs, especially tripling them out of rec space, particularly the fitness and machine space, activities, studios in the designated green, and then 1/6 mile walking and running track up on the upper level. A very porous building by design. Porous, I mean, where you see the X's on the upper drawing, you actually be able to see through 2, sometimes 3 levels down into the student center, even to kind of connect everybody sort of visually through the building. And just some very, very rough sketches, basketball court in the heart of the building. And then on the 6th level, the West Building is the Career Center, and a really important aspect of the project. These folks are now embedded into the first floor and lower level of Flanner Hall. They're really out of space, and as the campus continues to grow, very difficult for recruiters and such employers to find it, and really, because of the demand for Notre Dame students, they need more space. And so this is going to be really accessible with the parking to the south, and a really mainstay of this West Building, connected with student life with the rec center and the student center below. So just some early character sketches, but a wonderful new addition to campus and a place to continue to grow the wonderful, terrific work our career services folks do in their mission. And then finally, the upper 3 levels of the West Building also appear above the rim and will be opportunities for outdoor club seating and the traditional operations booths and hospitality that Notre Dame does currently in its existing press box. And some example images of that are one of those. So I'm going to leave it on this slide. I went a little bit longer than I was planning, but I want to make sure we maximize the rest of the time for questions. And I like this photograph, again, of Matt Kishore, because it almost feels like, even though it's not an unprecedented period of growth at the university, it does feel, at least in my time here, a lightning striking here, all in a good way, not in a damaging way, but in a terrific way. And it's, again, a pleasure and an honor to be with everybody today. And Kevin, let's turn it open for questions.
All right, Doug, thanks so much. For those of you watching live, just a reminder, you can submit your questions using the Q&A panel on the bottom part of your screen. To start off, I guess, Doug, we got questions about a number of different topics. Let's start with one that I'm sure is close to your heart as a former architecture student, which is we have a number of questions from people about the new architecture building. And one question we've received a number of times, Rachel just sent one in, what is happening to Bond Hall? And is there still going to be architecture classes there as well? And if not, what will kind of take over that space?
Yeah, it actually leads to a bigger question: what happens to Hager Hall when psychology moves out and into the Crossroads project? What happens to the space in Flanner Hall when so much of social sciences, or all of social sciences occupying that building, moves into the new Nanomech Hall? So we have groups of people, committees, examining all the vacated space that will happen over the next several years, and starting to understand the needs beyond those that will be fulfilled by new buildings, and how we'll repopulate those. So nothing to report yet on particularly Bond Hall or actually on any of these buildings, but suffice to say that a lot of people are interested in all these buildings, and it'll be a task to make sure we sort of right fit the reuses and repurposing of them.
Right. We had another question about the new architecture building and whether or not there was any concern when the site was being chosen that, for, as Dan says, his characterization, he says, a group of students who are already arguably the most isolated on campus, was there any concern about isolating them further, pushing them kind of towards the edge of campus?
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of discussion about it, and I think one of the things that we acknowledged in speaking with architecture leadership and Michael Kudus's group as dean there is that so much of your time in architecture here at Notre Dame is actually spent off campus. And so you come in as a first-year student, and certainly they'll have their studio and classes in the building. Sophomore year the same, but ultimately, of course, we all know third year is a terrific year in Rome. Everybody goes to. When they come back from Rome, many choose to move off campus. Not everyone, but many do. And then certainly in fifth year, because of the demand for space on campus, fifth years all move off. Mm-hmm. And then when you consider the graduate student population, they also, of course, live off campus. And so in essence, when you look at the average sort of daily tenant in the building from a student perspective, and then add faculty to it, virtually, certainly a significant majority of the people live off campus. And so we'll be able to accommodate them maybe better by having some adjacent parking, but also having architects involved at the edge of the community and maybe even being more accessible to folks for opportunities to work with city leadership, townspeople, neighborhood leaders in thinking through urban planning issues, which of course is an important sub-interest in our curriculum here at Notre Dame, might be a good thing.
We've had a number of questions come in about the development, what you call East Quad, and the two new planned dorms. One question was, do the new dorms indicate a desire on the university's part to increase student enrollment, or is it more just is there a current kind of housing crunch, and is that the purpose of the dorms?
Yeah, it is to really relieve the crunch, and particularly, as I understand it, the last year or so, we've had a waiting list. We haven't been able to accommodate every student, particularly transfer students that wish to come to Notre Dame and have the Notre Dame experience living in our residence hall. So it's a terrific problem to have. So there is no plan to grow the enrollment, and so this will be a basic continuation of trying to just provide a little bit of more elbow space for folks and making sure we meet all the demands.
When talking about the East Quad, you obviously showed the two planned new dorms and the beautiful proposed research building. Is there potential for more development of other new buildings around kind of that East Quad area, or do you think it would be limited to those three new buildings?
No, we do think over time, we always try to take a multi-generation, multi-decade look ahead that there'll be opportunities to continue to grow the academic core of campus in that particular zone. And so opportunities particularly to the north and northeast of those first two or three buildings as anchor buildings, I think you'll see a continuation of that research mission.
We have some questions that have come in, sort of more general, broad questions. One from Joe. He asks, Joe seems to be have a very good eye on our campus buildings. He asks, why has the Belden brick pattern in recent buildings on campus changed slightly, with some darker bricks interspersed with the lighter ones?
It's a terrific question. It makes me feel good that people are noticing those kinds of subtle changes, maybe not so subtle. But I think this probably began to occur 12 or 15 years ago when we realized that the palette over time had become the brick palette down to like three colors. And so it was preventing us, we think, from really having our collegiate Gothic buildings that we had returned to at about that era from being as richly perceived as they could have. So we went back and studied what the differences were of the brick that we're using in that era versus, let's say, for instance, Alumni and Dillon's brick, and learned that there's, of course, a huge disparity between the number of colors, the kind of texture. Some of it's due to the manufacturing process of brick and origins of the clay that's used to make the brick. But in the end, we wanted to really go back to the roots of that particular brick palette. And so what you see us using today in most recent buildings, probably the last 5 or 6, is a 7-color brick that's it's trying to be as representative of the origins of those beloved halls that really began, I think, Notre Dame's venture into the collegiate Gothic period of the 1930s.
Another general question here from John. He asks, what was the building that took us past the 10 million square foot under roof mark on campus?
Oh, it's a good question. It's probably, I would say, the addition to the Morris Inn. The Morris Inn last year, if you recall, 39-week essentially reconstruction, partial demolition, and then a very significant expansion, went from about 92,000 square feet to almost 137,000 square feet or so. So I think that was the building that put us over that barrier, or that mark.
We have a question about kind of the Notre Dame Avenue area of campus. It was asked by, losing my place here, but by Andrew about the Hesburgh International Center. And he was wondering if that building is going to be renovated at all. And he notes that it doesn't seem to match the other architecture, especially on Notre Dame Avenue.
No, it is distinctly different. It was built and designed in an era that was more interpretive of collegiate Gothic. So we call that either sort of bridge or transitional style of campus and of architectural style. So in the end, it's still a terrific building. It actually doesn't need a renovation. It's a terrific home to so many of our important institutes and centers like Kroc and Kellogg, and will continue to be that way. It is an important gathering space for folks with a wonderful courtyard and a small auditorium in the building. So we have no plans to change it. It will just be part of the fabric that I think helps make Notre Dame as a campus really interesting, and to have a little bit of variety, particularly along the avenue, I think is a welcome thing.
We've also received a number of questions about the Steppen Center, and a few questions about if there are any future plans for it, and even a question about are there plans that it's going to be demolished?
Yeah, no, it's a common question, and sort of timely. It's a busy building, and actually it's a workhorse building. We have over 400 events scheduled in that building a year. It's a really important part of our student activity complement. A variety of folks use it. A lot of community folks use it. It's accessible for them as well, and so it's a way we can continue to engage with South Bend and beyond. It's also a very inexpensive building for us to run. I mean, it's not air conditioned, as we all know. It just takes a little bit of heat and periodic maintenance. I think we've redoubled our efforts over the last several years to make sure the leaks stop that were chronic for a number of years, and I think we've been successful in doing that. So we see it continuing on its site for quite some time.
We have a number of questions about the Campus Crossroads project. One of our viewers asks if you're worried at all that the height of the Crossroads project could hurt the sort of French Village feel that you spoke of campus.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good perception in terms of it's definitely a different scale, but we think particularly where it is in context with everything else, it's away from really the center of the campus, even though it's floating right at the edge there. I think it'll be fine. We've studied it very closely. We built a very significant model of the buildings themselves, sitting in the context in which all these other buildings reside, and believe that it will be successful in dealing with the scale there.
We have a question from John who asks, with the press box now facing west, will that be a problem in terms of the sun?
Probably not, particularly in terms of what the west building will do in terms of shielding the sun as it sets. Our games can fairly consistently are played in the late afternoon in a setting sun situation late into the year, and so that west press box building, actually, or west sideline structure, will actually help shield that. So particularly view of field should not be impacted, but also the press is supplemented with, of course, a lot of television monitors too, just
Sure.
in case there was a glare at a particular point in time.
Right. Speaking of views, Andrew asks, there are rumors that there's going to be a cutout on the north part of the stadium in order to better view the Word of Life mural. And he wanted to know if you could speak to that and if there's kind of, I guess, truth to that rumor.
No, no plans to do that.
Okay. Another question was about the cost of the project. And specifically, John was wondering what's driving the projected costs of the Campus Crossroads buildings. And he says that DPAC and Jordan Hall or large modern buildings with a lot of technology inside each, but appear to have cost a lot less, according to published university sources.
Yeah, I think in the end, the buildings are going to be very consistent in terms of costs. It'll be towards the higher end of maybe if you analyze it, cost per square foot, but not unreasonable. It'll be less than $500 total project cost, including construction, all the furniture, all the signage, fees, essentially all total project costs. And that includes an extensive amount of utility relocation work. The first phase of the project will be a massive undertaking to move utilities out of the way. Previous plans had never anticipated these structures being built along the east and west sidelines, and so a lot of work will commence with that. It's significant kind of style of construction, particularly because the stadium also didn't anticipate new vertical loads imposed on it. So we're taking a lot of different and creative tactics to deal with it. Those have cost to them, but in the end, we're creating a vast amount of space for, I think, very reasonable cost per square foot.
We also have a question about the schedule for the construction of the buildings and whether they'll go up at the same time or if it's going to be one by one.
Yeah, from a constructability standpoint, we don't want to bite too much of the apple off at once. And so the plan is that we will start east and west simultaneously. They will get a year's head start. They're the biggest buildings. They'll need that head start. And then exactly 1 year later, the south building will begin to be constructed, and it'll catch up with the rest, or the other two, and all three will be completed at the same time.
Great, great. There was also, we had a question about, you showed some slides showing the athletic facilities in one of the new buildings in the Crossroads project, and the person was wondering if there's going to be an increased amount of space for student use of basketball and volleyball courts because of the new building compared to what there currently is in Rolf's.
Yeah, we're actually working with our partners in athletics to develop a long-term plan for repurposing a lot of the space, particularly in the Joyce Center and the North Dome and the gyms and other areas that surround the North Dome. And so we're really not finished with it yet. Still needs some work to finish up, but ultimately I think with the amount of space that we've identified as needed for our students and student athletes, I'm pleased with the progress we're making, and I'm excited about the opportunities that space is going to provide us.
We have a question from Ben about if there will be construction for the Crossroads project during football season and upcoming football seasons, and if so, how will that affect tailgating and things like that?
Sure. Should not have a negative effect on tailgating. We'll actually, whatever construction fence we put up, it will be pushed back and out of the tailgate zones right prior to that weekend of a home game, and then it'll expand back after the game and be continued to use as a laydown and staging area for construction. There'll be some pre-work prior to the start of major construction activities, likely to start this fall. So we'll have some pre-work associated with it, and just some preparation work. So whenever we start the project, we hit the ground running.
We had a question from Pat who noted that a lot of several of the new construction projects seem to be going up on or affect parking lots, and the question was kind of, are there plans to open up new areas for parking on campus?
Yeah, it's a very good question, very common question. To the south, I think our long-term plan is, besides consuming a portion of those south lots for the new architecture building, our idea is to preserve all the rest of the surface parking there. We know the important tradition that tailgating provides us, but most importantly, we'd like to avoid a parking structure on that part of campus. It's a really visible perspective from the public's edge plus the campus edge, and so we anticipate really leaving the rest of that untouched, at least in our current plans. To the north and northeast, where we've consumed or about to consume portions of the library lot, we've actually constructed and expanded new parking just to the east of Leahy Drive. And so faculty, staff, students will be invited to park in those areas. And as I mentioned before in the presentation, long term, we envision a parking structure in that neighborhood.
Great. We had a question about what is the breakout of the type of space being added, I think, meaning through Crossroads in terms of square footage for classroom versus office versus student space. I don't know if you have nailed it down that specifically.
I would probably make a mistake if I try to recall the exact square footages in my head, but just to give you a sense of proportion, the student center at 2 levels long is about 450, 480 feet long, times 2 floors, by about 200 feet deep. So quick math suggests how large that is. So multiply that with then 2 levels of exactly that in the rec center, and then the career center right above it. So I think clearly the vast majority of this space being constructed in these buildings are really for primarily academic and then student life.
We had a question from Ben about Jenkins Hall and Nanomech Hall, and he was wondering what the purpose of those buildings are, what departments they'll be holding.
Yeah, I apologize. Should have dwelled a little bit more of that in my initial remarks. But Nanomech Hall will be a home for our social sciences, and so those folks are really burgeoning at the seams, and particularly in Flanner Hall and some other buildings. That'll be a new home for those folks. Jenkins Hall will be our new home for our School of International Studies, and so that's an exciting new addition to campus and a growing one. Time is never better than now in terms of really continuing to have Notre Dame as the stage and the environment in which scholars from across the world, across the globe, can come interact. So much of that will actually happen in that building.
We had a question from Dave about the 2 new residence halls that are going up. We had Erin Hoffman-Harding in for a previous On Point at Notre Dame a couple of months ago, and she mentioned that in Lyons Hall there's been a pilot program with a married couple living in residence in Lyons Hall, a faculty member. And Dave was wondering if at the new residence hall, does, when you're planning the space for the new residence hall, has that been part of the planning at all, creating space for the potential of a married couple living in residence in those dorms?
Yeah, it is baked into our plans. We don't expect it to be imminent, but you want to have flexibility. Who knows what the future would bring? And so I think as planners, our job is to really try to look to the future and design as flexible buildings as possible. So we will build that flexibility in.
Great. And we've got time for about one more question here. We have a question about the west building of the Crossroads project, where we spoke about the athletic spaces that we'll be adding. And one of our watchers wanted to know if that building is going to be, if the athletic spaces in that building are for all students or if they're specifically for student athletes.
It's for all students. So the rec center will be used and programmed exactly like the Rockney Memorial and Rolf's rec sports center on the east part of campus. And so faculty, staff, students, the Notre Dame community in essence, be really welcome to come in and participate in just a countless variety of programs, but also just their own fitness and access to all the equipment, the basketball courts, the running track, just as those facilities are currently.
Our last question, we had one of our viewers was wondering if there are any plans long-term to change the current perimeter of campus, if there are any plans to kind of push past those perimeters and build out.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. It's important to us to keep Notre Dame as walkable as possible, and in fact, it's one of the driving factors for the Crossroads project and the locations of these really dense buildings that have so many destinations built into them to be right at around the stadium. Rather than move the stadium to another location, which of course we would never do, or to put these new buildings, put a new anthropology and psychology building at the edge of campus that it would continue to sprawl things. We like the perimeter as we have it. We're committed to keeping Notre Dame very, very pedestrian friendly, and have no plans to grow the perimeter.
Great. Well, Doug, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Enjoyed it.
And thanks to all of you who watch live online and watching later on our YouTube page. For future editions of all of our online learning series, please visit my.nd.edu/online learning. I'm Kevin Brennan with the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Thanks so much for watching.